Episode 149, Learned Contentment. Welcome to Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast helping DIY marketers find your micro influencer magic so you attract raving fans and repeat buyers. I'm your host, Candice Rodarty, and this week I'm joined by software developer mentor, Rob Broadhead. Rob is a lifelong technical geek that has been part of numerous startups over the years and used those experiences to find out what brings him joy. Give your health and your immune system a boost with omega-3s and spirulina from the world's most sustainable grower in the world, OrloNutrition.com. Orlo grows algae in pure sustainable abundance in their first-of-its-kind aquaculture plant house in Iceland. Orlo's products are more bioavailable. This means you get all the benefits without the fishy burps or nasty aftertaste. Their unique polar omega structure boasts 3 times the absorption over fish or other algae oils. Orlo is the future of nutrition. Omega-3s, pure plant protein and micronutrients that provide all the benefits without damaging Earth's ecosystems so people and planet can thrive. Listeners of Gratitude Geek qualify for an extra 10% off their first order. Visit OrloNutrition.com and use the coupon code GRATITUDE10 and save today. Orlo Nutrition, because nutrition shouldn't be an either or. Welcome, Rob.
Hey, glad to be here.
So I can't wait to dig into this, but first we need to hear your story. Tell us your unique story. How did you get to where you are today?
My unique story, I'll try to summarize it a little bit. Otherwise, it could take us a little while. I've been around for many years. From a professional point of view, though, and development along those ways, I started out, as I said, I've always been a technical guy. As a kid, I was one of those that got a hold of a computer early on, took a class and loved it, and have continued on. Ended up sort of a little bit stumbling into computer science as a college degree. I was always into science and math and wasn't sure if I wanted to go into computers, and it turns out I did and have really enjoyed it ever since. Started after I graduated, got into, worked for consulting companies, not necessarily as a consultant, but as I think it sort of led me to where I am, because these were consulting companies that also built software. And now it's more common where you see companies that they build software, but part of their products is they also support and have consulting professional services around those products. And that was sort of my where I sort of started out with companies that did that. And that allowed me to see a lot of facets of the business from a more of a technical side. And then getting into the late 90s and beyond, where there's startups and startups and startups. There's always startups out there. And I managed to connect to many over the years. So those cases, if you're in a startup, you wear every hat, basically. You're doing everything. And it really helped feed my sort of my entrepreneurial itch early on, and then also helped me see a lot of areas of business from front to back. And that allowed me to then sort of even craft a little bit more the consulting I did. So I went from building products to helping. Really, it's a little more, I guess it's building companies in a sense when they have a technical kind of service or a product. And even now, a lot of time, it seems like everybody has a technical piece to them. Everybody needs IT to some level, even if they're selling, I don't know, they could be selling like plants or origami or something like that. There is that back office piece that is very valuable, that whether you're online or not, even if you're just a mom and pop pet food store on the corner, there are things like, billing and invoicing and that kind of stuff that you need to keep track of. And that is what I do, is I help customers now. That's one of my big things, is helping them figure out what is the solution that makes sense for them, because sometimes it's a little scary and it's not going to be in their wheelhouse. It's something that they didn't sign up to learn IT. They want to go sell this product or provide this service. And I help them realize where they can find the places where they can use technology to do what they want to do better, which really is where I've gotten to, as I have regularly looked at what I've done over the years and made adjustments and tweaks to work myself in a situation where I'm doing what I want to do as much as possible. And we all have those things that we're not as big a fan of, but finding ways to offset those and tools and things to automate them, or just in some cases help me forget them, or close enough so that they get done and I can go do things that keep me happy.
Uh, I have several things I want to touch on. So the first one is startups, right? There is a particular mindset of the type of person who enjoys working in a startup, and that same person isn't necessarily a good long-term employee. Want to talk about that? About the mindset?
No, not at all. I guess that's something I didn't mention, that I've worked for my own company. I started it up 20 years ago, and in that time, I've actually even not been a consistent employee of my own company. There's been times that I've gotten pulled off into something else, and then and sort of like let my company coast. Over my career, I think I've lost track. I've probably worked, I mean, actual worked as an employee for at least probably 2 dozen companies or something like that. And it's an interesting thing, because part of it is the companies don't last. There's a large number of companies on my resume that don't even exist. You can't find anything about them anymore because they've just disappeared off the face of the earth. But then there is also that, for a lot of people, and I've worked with a lot of those, and probably have that, is there's that, I don't know, we'll call it like a startup high or something like that, that you have, where there's all this vision and things that you have, and all of these opportunities, and embracing those. And a lot of times, if you're that person, or at least in my experience, if you're that person, when you get to the like crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's and the detail side of it, that's not really your thing. You're more big picture vision. And when you get down to the details, you get to the point where you're like, okay, I want to let somebody else do it. And honestly, it's um as far as like bang for your buck, or best use for your money. I think that's part of it, where there are, um and I talk to this with some of the entrepreneurs and that I work with. It's like, hey, there's a time where it's good to have those like high energy people that just want to like just do stuff. And yeah, they're not going to finish it all off, but they're going to get you like it's sort of like a jump start. You get a lot of things started, or and you do have to herd cats a little bit to get them, to make sure that they stay focused. But you sort of do this big push and get 80% of the way there. And so that's a whole Pareto principle, basically that 80-20 rule. If you can get these people and let them just burn the candle at both ends, get you to a good starting point, and then they almost by natural selection sort of will shift onto something else. And that's when you start replacing them with those longer term people. They're like, I just want to do X. And occasionally you'll find that person that they are doing that for you, and that is exactly what they want to do. Or as yourself, you find that job that you want to do, that company that you want to build, and you're able to, because you want that thing to grow. To me, that's where, at least that's where I've solved that problem for myself, is say, hey, because I want that to grow, I know that there's these finishing points that I have to do. So I've actually become a milestone kind of person, and use to-do lists and things like that to help me say, hey, you cannot go, you can't go chase that squirrel yet. You've got to finish this thing before you move on to it, because otherwise you have too many things on your to-do list.
Well, keeping a to-do list, it's very satisfying when you get to check it off.
Hmm.
If you don't have that to-do list, you never get to check it off. Oh, I did it.
Yeah.
Yay! So do you know off the top of your head how many startups don't last? What the percentage is, the startups that fail?
I don't know what it is now. It varies in markets. It'll be interesting going into, everybody I think sort of sees that we're going into probably a recession or something along those lines, where we're sitting. And particularly coming off of the last couple of years, there were a lot of people that, because of just the COVID stuff, there's all kinds of startups that was sort of like a flurry of that, because people are like, hey, I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs, but I've got this cool idea, so I'm going to go work on that for a while. Um, and so it'll be interesting to see where that skews the numbers, maybe because it's just been a flood of people coming in, almost because I'd say almost because they had to, or because they felt like, I got nothing better to do. So it wasn't as planned maybe as normally. But even in traditional sense, it's like, it depends on who you ask, but it's like 3 or 4 out of 5 startups just, they're done in 5 years or less. It's like, if you can get past that, usually it's in like that 2 to 3 year period. If you can get past 5 years, your odds of succeeding suddenly go way up. And I don't know how much of that is just because you're that driven that you make it to 5 years. But a lot of it, I think, from small businesses because they put enough things in place beforehand, so they had that runway to go for 5 years. More often than not, a small business, the reason they close the doors is not because they didn't like it, it's not because they weren't happy, it's because they didn't have the funding and the planning to be able to get through those lean first couple of years. Because you don't have an idea and you like open the store or turn on the site and then like boom, you're off and running. There's that growth period. You got to get word of mouth out. You got to get people to understand. You've got to get them to know who you are and learn about you and trust you and be willing to buy your product or service. And that takes time.
I often tell people that you have to be willing to eat beans and rice for a few years if you want your company to succeed. And if you're not willing to do that, you probably aren't going to make it.
Yeah.
you know? Should we move on to
Sure.
happier things? Let's talk about contentment. How did you become so content? How did you learn to be so content? Because you have had, now that we've heard your story, you have a lot of reasons not to be content. So
Yeah.
why are you so content today?
And it really is. It comes down to almost everything in life I've decided comes down to perspective. You can look at, I mean, like, think about the most basic thing, like your favorite sports team is you're happy because they won, and then the other fans are unhappy because their team lost. And it's the same thing. And granted, it's different teams, but it is different perspective. As you can look at something, and I think you can look at any situation and you can see where I'm going to say almost, I guess never is a hard word to put in there, but where you can find some things that are positives. If you won the lottery and then you lost all the money, I don't know, gambling, or it fell out of your car or whatever it is, you can focus on, oh, I lost all that money, but you can also say, hey, at least I had that money to lose in the first place. And so I'm a net zero. At least it's that it could be worse kind of approach. But from a contentment point of view, is it is a little different because it is what I refer to as like retrospectives, or it's analyzing on a regular basis. Just and this sort of grew out of New Year's resolutions. Is I years and years ago, I've always sort of had been I'll make a New Year's resolution, and early on it was forgotten a week or two later, like everybody else basically. And I started looking at that and I said, I want to make that meaningful to some extent, because it started to bother me, because I would look back, I'm like, why am I made this resolution for the last 10 years and nothing has changed. And started looking at those kinds of things and saying, okay, well, how do I I don't want to just go through life. I don't want to just, coast. I want to have, get to the end of the year and be able to say, hey, I did something. And it started with sort of the resolution. It's like, hey, I want that resolution to at least stick into, I don't know, the first month or the first quarter. And then that evolved into, okay, why do if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to put that effort in, what is that going to do for me? Why do I want to do that? If it's like, I want to lose weight, is it because because everybody wants to lose weight, or is it because I want to, it's because I want to look better or be able to do something physically that I normally couldn't, or something like that. And then those things start thinking more in general, like, how do I, let's not just do surface things. Like, let's make if I'm going to put the effort into it, let's have a resolution that has value to me, that I'm going to be happier for it. And then that grew into, okay, well, what is happy for me? What are the things what is a change that is useful to me, that is going to be something where a month from now, 3 months from now, I'm going to thank myself for doing that. I'm going to say, hey, I'm glad I did that because I did X. And that has led me, early on, it was a removing negatives kind of approach. It's like, what just wears me out? And in a bad way. Like, kids, they wear you out, but you're not going to get rid of your kids. So it's what wears me out or drains me, really, is more the thing that I don't get any positive value from it. And so what are some things that drain, and what are some things that I can stop, or that I can make an adjustment that makes that thing effectively, we'll say, go away. And then it grew from there. I got to a point where I was like, okay, I've sort of removed negatives. And professionally, this was stuff like who I work for and the kinds of projects I took and things like that. In my personal life, it was certain things like, I want to have like I worked my butt off all the time. So it was, late nights all the time, works on Saturday, worked on Sundays. And I went, you know, yeah, sort of went biblical on it. It's like, okay, I'm going to do a Sabbath. I like, this has worked for thousands and thousands of years for people that this is something that they do. So I'm going to try that. So I'm going to take a day a week and I'm going to not essentially plan to not do anything. And by that, it's not like, it's not like I'm not going to turn on and off lights but it's basically like work stuff. It's going to be fun. So it's like, maybe we're going to go for a drive that day, or I'm going to go see a movie or do something that's just like, I'm not going to let life intrude more than I need to. And by life, it's the business life, because it's stuff like, hey, I want to go spend a day with my kids and do something. So it's like, I'm going to make sure I sort of schedule for that. And that changed a lot, because then it comes down to, okay, what do I want to change? What do I want to reduce? What do I want to remove? And it actually snowballs, because as you do that and you realize that, hey, I pulled this thing out that was draining me and I replaced it with something that energized me. And all of a sudden I've got more energy and now I can get more stuff done. And it's become, to me, that's why I call it sort of a learned contentment. It's like, I didn't really know what was going to make me happy and content and what was draining me, until I really started to got intentional about it. And then I started testing stuff. Just like, I was like, oh, I wonder if I like that. I wonder if I don't. And then it grew into, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I've sort of got the negatives. What are some positives? Well, there's things, and then there's things you're like, I want to try that. So just as a quick example, was about, now it's about 4 or 5 years ago, as part of my New Year's, sort of looking at what I was doing and what I want to change. I was looking at the year ahead. I was like, okay, I'm going to learn how to dance. I'm going to learn like 3 dances, and like official, like, actual dance, not like just bopping around or something like that. And ended up, almost immediately I found a place, like a dance club where they teach stuff, and I've been dancing like a fool ever since. And it's like one of those that I found out, like, this is something I would have never done other than that, and I love it. It's
I
like,
gotta know, what are the 3 dances?
oh, the 3 at the time were, I think I didn't even know, I didn't know what dances were out there. I knew I wanted to learn waltz and rumba. And like 3 months later, I knew waltz, rumba, um, East Coast swing, and was getting to be like, knew some decent stuff about waltz. And then within 6 months, I probably had 10 different dances I knew. And by the end of the year, I was taking lessons and doing like private lessons and going out with dance groups all the time and stuff like that. And to this day, it's like, every week, if there's a week that I don't go out dancing, it is a bad week. Well, not necessarily a bad week, but it is a rare week for sure.
I love that story. So the East Coast swing is kind of difficult. Sometimes it's also called the jitterbug. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of hand in hand. My parents could jitterbug like you wouldn't believe. I swear, every time we went to a wedding and they got on the dance floor, everybody would clear this floor for them. They would just
Oh,
clear the
wow.
floor for them and
Are
watch them
your parents
dance.
Fred and Ginger?
No, Ray and Kim. My mom passed away about oh wow, 12 years ago, I guess. Um but yeah, they just cleared the floor. They were that so I'm telling you, men, if you know how to dance, it's very attractive to women.
I keep I keep telling my kids that, my boys, I don't know, I've got 4 boys and a girl. And my boys, the 3 older are all boys, and they're all in their 20s and, college age and out on their own. And I tell them that all the time. I'm like, hey, women love it. And even now, even in modern days, there are a lot, you go out and there are a lot of young women that dance. And I'm surprised how many men are out there. Young guys are out there and they can dance. They're actually sort of very good out there.
Tell us what you do for a living, because you've done all these things, but what do you do? How do you help people today?
How people there's 2 ways that I really help, as I've mentioned a little bit, is I help my real, the thing that pays the bills is I help business owners understand, basically it's problem solving for business owners, but with a technical bent. So I'll go talk to them about And so it's sort of like an assessment as well. It's what do you want to do? Where are you at? Where do you want to be? And then a lot of times it's in early stages or where they're looking to grow, make a substantial growth. So like they've been going for a while. They're like, okay, I'm going to step it up. I'm going to, whether it's in performance, or a lot of times it's in like, I'm going to expand to new markets. I'm going to go for new businesses, things like that. And it's how can you use technology to reduce your pain points, whatever they happen to be, or to make you more productive. And it does go back to that contentment. It's like, okay, what are the things that are, essentially holding you back from growing as a company from a tools and processes point of view? It's like, let's see, what do you do? How do you do it? And how can you use stuff that's available, sometimes very free or very cheap, that again goes back to, because you're a business owner, you're focused on your business, you don't know what's out there in technology. That's just some wizard that's there there's something behind the curtains. It's to help show them where, hey, we can do these 3 steps. It's going to get you to a place where now these things that are slowing you down, or that you're spending a lot of time, or that you're having to hire staff for, can go away, so that you can actually grow and not get stuck dealing with administrative stuff. Instead, those things can, be taken care of, automated, outsourced. And it may be that it's entirely purchasing products. It may be that it's helping them, they're at a point where they need an IT staff, and it may be helping them build an IT department, or showing them what that looks like. Or the other one is to the point where it's somebody that wants to build a product or a service that's highly technical, helping them actually build that out and actually do that implementation side of it. And then that's a lot of what I do. And then because I do the consulting side, but also all the way into implementation, that's where the developer side came in, is that I find ways to get, it's basically looking at a technology project and try to find the best bang for your buck. So take the expensive people and do the things that really only expensive people can do, and the cheap things, and get people that can do the cheap things and do it cheaply. And that's where we started building in, finding, developers and entrepreneurial types that can feed that lower end of it, and then help businesses grow.
So you're basically building a network of go-to people that your clients can go to,
In a
which is
sense, yeah.
brilliant. I love that. Do you want to talk about your 2 other books that you've written, Creating Software and Finding Joy and Success in an IT Career?
Yeah. The ones the long subtitle, The Source Code of Happiness, was me sort of like this. I looked at what I'd done, and I know enough people that are sort of in that same kind of mindset of like, hey, I want to do software, but I don't know how do I do that? What does that roadmap look like? And so it's really more aimed at people that are, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 years into their career, from somebody that's gone further along, and saying, here's some of the paths that you can take. Here's things you can do, and things that you need to think about, because IT is a very broad area. It's like sales or marketing, or that it is a very wide thing. And so to say you want an IT career doesn't really limit you that much at all. So a lot of the book is about, here's how I approach stuff, but here's where I looked at potential paths and either took them or didn't. And if you want to or not, here's how you can test these things out. Here's how you can test the waters while still growing, and do so in a low risk way, so you're not having to like jump jobs or change careers or anything. Instead, that you're very intentional about, hey, I'm going to put together essentially a career roadmap, and then I'm going to make adjustments to that as I find out what I like and what I don't like. And the other book uh is very process. It goes back to the consulting side, and it's basically so somebody could pick it up and say, hey, I want to, I know I want to build software. I need to build an application. I need to build a product. And it gets a little technical, but it's aimed at, I guess a manager type or something like that, where somebody says, I want to build a product. What are some of the things I need to think about? What are like some things that go on into that, or that are part of that process? And that was what that book was, is to provide something for, a lot of times it's for my customers, is to say, hey, look, these are the things you need to think about. These are the things that you're going to hear about, so that you're more informed about what you're about to step into. So it gives you a little heads up, so you can make intelligent decisions and informed decisions about some of those things.
Well, the most important thing you can do for your business once you've, launched it and funded it is create the systems for it.
Mhm.
And having a roadmap on how to create those systems or even figuring out what those systems are is really important. So it sounds like you are that is something that you support and believe in as well.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite marketing tip, tool, or technique that you'd like to share with the solopreneur audience out there listening right now?
I think from a people, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs in particular, that work balance is hard. Work-life balance is hard to get because your life is your work. It's there. It's like, I think a lot of people don't. Like, okay, there is no balance in those. That's just what I do. It's all the time. But there are things that are not your work that are important. And I think it's my the marketing tip that I would say is that when you're a solopreneur in particular, is that realize that yes, accepting that it's almost impossible to turn off the business side of your head. But that doesn't mean that you can't go work on your business in a sense while you're doing other stuff. So there's going to be, I don't know how many people I've run into over the years through like parents of within the school with my kids, or from sports, or from other activities or social events that we've gone out and done, where there were connections that came out of those. It wasn't a networking event. It wasn't anything business about it, but because people buy from those that they know, trust, like and trust, your social circles that you build going out and living your life actually brings those people. There's people you're going to know. They're going to like you. Some won't, but there'll be those that like you and those that trust you. And it's because like you always want that connection. And so from a sales and marketing point of view is, I think, and particularly a solopreneur, because so often so much of it is you are your brand, that it is a great way for you to grow uh, just knowledge about your brand, but also for you to help refine it a little bit too, is to sort of think back through some of those things, like who are the people that I like to be associated with or want to be associated with? What resonates when I'm talking to people and they say, what do you do? And I say, I do this. What resonates? And so there is a way that you can sort of do a two birds with one stone kind of approach of like, go out there and live your life. And I sort of accept that you're going to be thinking about business a lot as well, and that's always going to bubble back up. But realize that you can do other things in life that normal people do, and it can still grow your business. So you get a win-win out of it.
Lately, I have been doing a little research into the differences between the way an American thinks or North American thinks and the way a European thinks about life in general. And something that is starkly different between North Americans and Europeans is North Americans, we really identify ourselves by our career. You know, I am a software developer. I am a podcaster. That we really identify ourselves by our career. In Europe, they identify themselves by the things they enjoy doing when they're not working. You know, I raise dogs. I'm a gardener. I love to crochet. And then for money, I am a garbage man, right? Or whatever. So they separate the things that identify who they are from the work that they do. And I just thought, well, that's kind of a beautiful thing, because I love to crochet. That's like my hobby. It's what I do for Zen. It's how I meditate. I crochet. And whenever somebody says, "Well, you really should sell your work because you do a great job," I'm like, first of all, I would have to sell it for like $1,000, and no one's gonna pay $1,000 for that. And second of all, I don't want to sell my hobby, my meditation, my Zen, right? I don't want to sell that. That's not who I am as a career. That's who I am to relax. So I really, I want to be more European in the way that I approach the world. you, you know, I don't know. What do you think?
I was There's two things. There's one is that I think that the route to true happiness is when you can combine those two. Is when what you do and what you like are the same. Like what you like to do earns you a living. But the caveat to that, it's funny, it goes back to the dancing, is my girlfriend and I dance all the time and have been dancing together for years, actually met through dancing. And we've had people that pushed it, said, oh, you should go out and you should compete because you guys have a fun time. You could go do that. And we've both said, no, we don't want to, because we don't want to introduce that, because both of us are very competitive. And we said that would change the fun side of it, because then it would be more of a chore. It'd be work.
And it would
And
change your relationship as well. I mean, just being honest, it would change
oh
your
yeah,
relationship.
it does, because it's like, and it like when we do that, when we've focused on stuff, we've had to explicitly have stuff like, okay, we're going to actually focus on, technique and work on it, versus we're just going to go have fun and mess around. And I think it's very, I think it's very wise of you to say, hey, I love doing that, but if that suddenly became my business, then I would feel like I have to do it. And especially if it's your Zen thing, if that's your thing where you go to get away, but it's also the thing that you do every day, then it's not you can't get away anymore. It's like, it'd be like living in, Christmas town or whatever. It's Christmas every day. It's like, okay, it's no longer special.
It's like when you're married to your business partner.
Yeah.
You have to separate the work from the play. You got to have fun time with your business partner, who's also your spouse.
Mhm.
And if she was your dance partner professionally, not just your dance partner, you would never have fun dancing anymore.
Right.
So my husband and I do fun stuff together that isn't related to our work at all. But then we have to do stuff that's related to work, and sometimes that's not so fun.
Yeah.
So who would you love to be introduced to? Like, what would be like your dream? I know you have a podcast. I know you've got other things. Who would you just want to be introduced to that would just make your day?
Oh, and currently alive. I mean, there's so many I'm one of the beauties of a podcast and an interview is that I talk to so many people, and I've always been fascinated by all the different stories. And just I've found that people, although they try my patience, particularly when we're on the road at the same time. But I think there's so many cool, unique stories out there. So I could talk to anybody and probably enjoy it. But I guess it's probably an odd thing is the latest one I think would be really interesting to sit down with is Penn Jillette from, if you think of Penn, if you've ever heard of Penn and Teller. I've
How
I've
interesting.
I've seen stuff that he's done and conversations he's had, um, particularly with regard to like religion and morality and ethics, because there's the way he is, his stage persona, but then also just some of the things he believes I think, are very surprising to people, because it's combinations that people wouldn't think about. But when you listen to him, it makes complete sense. It's like, this is, he is in an area, what he understands himself and what he believes and what he thinks about other people, and that in a way that, to me, it would just be fascinating to talk on just almost sort of random subjects about that, on politics and morality and ethics, and getting his point of view and how he got there, because it's just it's a fascinating I think point of view and perspective that he has on things.
I'm gonna have to do a little more digging into him. Oh, and I can't ever remember a time in my life when Penn and Teller didn't exist.
I'm the same way. I'm about the same age, and I remember them from earlier. I think they were on like Sesame Street when I was a kid one
Oh,
time.
to one of your recent podcasts, and you were talking about diversity in diversity of ideas and diversity in the workplace, and I really was happy to hear what you said, because I think that monolithic life is boring, right?
Hmm.
If and you got to throw a little spice and a little color and a little mojo into the mix to get the best ideas. And especially, I mean, with developing software development, it may seem like, oh, how boring, it's just code. Well, I owned a web design business, and in the mid 2000s, when CSS became a thing and I was going to have to learn a new language, I sold my web design business because I didn't have it in my bandwidth to learn a new language. And I know that since that time, there's probably been layers and layers and layers of top of the CSS that, now every website out there is, built on. Um, so it's constantly changing. So if you don't have new ideas coming in, you're not going to have change. You want to talk about that? Because
Oh yeah.
I love that you were covering that.
I think that is that's part of I talk about that a lot as part of the discussion with business owners, is because it's funny. I was just writing a blog on this today. Is you go into somebody and say, what is your business like? Where are you at? What are your pain points? What do you want to do to grow? and you'll get answers. And especially you almost get like with especially solopreneurs, it's almost like a robotic answer because they've said it so many times. It's almost their elevator pitch. And then you ask them, we'll start walking through the points they made and say, okay, why? Or why do you do that? Or what is the reason for that? What is the value that you get out of that? And then suddenly things start, you'll find sometimes that they'll say, well, that's the way I've always done it. And that to me is like a big thing, like, hey, why don't you look at, or why don't we talk about what are some other approaches? Because I mean, I know everybody, all your listeners are perfect, but I'm that human that's not. And invariably, the first couple of times we do something, it ain't right. It's off. It's not. We definitely don't get that perfect solution, first time out. And as you if you just pick that solution, like, okay, it works, and then you stick with it, you're probably, almost definitely working with an imperfect solution, unless you just got really, really lucky. And so it is valuable to go back and take a look at things and more importantly, it's that you have your experience and what you've learned. And that actually led to that answer in the first place. If you can get another set of eyes, and particularly one that's not your perspective, it changes things dramatically. It's my favorite example of that is the blind men that are trying to describe an elephant. And if you think about, even from a point of view, there's all these different things that you see. And the reason that you see something very different is because your perspective is completely different. And it's frustrating to me, and I don't want to get on a soapbox too much, but it's frustrating to me in modern society that so often people are like, I'm right and you're wrong, when it can be, both of you can be 100% right, but also wrong, because you're assuming that they're not also right, because you've now shut out their perspective, and you're missing something that may be critical to you getting to the best solution.
My favorite story to tell people is Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about how scientists argue with each other. Because most non-scientists, you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong. But with scientists, it's you could be right and I could be wrong, or I could be right and you could be wrong, or we could both be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And having that, just adding that little thing, well, maybe we're both wrong. Just adding that little layer to your thought process, to your critical thinking, could change everything.
Mm-hmm.
It could change everything. All right, we need to wrap up. This has been a very fascinating conversation. I, I love having organic conversations with people I've never met before about subjects that are fascinating and interesting. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. But now it's my favorite time of the interview. It's the time that you get to share your moment of gratitude. For whom or what are you most grateful?
Oh wow, my life is so full of stuff. I'm gonna have to say that. All right, I'll go personal on this one, I guess, is I'm probably most grateful for the ability to actually see things in a positive light. I have through my life have developed sort of a general positive attitude. Not quite like, Pollyanna, but I've developed a positive attitude. And I think that has done, when I look at what that's done and the opportunities that's given me to walk into something and say, hey, it's probably not going to kill me. And if it does, then I'm dead. So it's like, let's move forward and see how this goes. And it has opened up so many doors and provided me experiences I otherwise never would have had.
Thanks for joining us this week for Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast, helping DIY marketers find your micro influencer magic so you attract raving fans and repeat buyers. Your time is precious, and I am ever so grateful that you chose to spend your time with us today. Be sure to check the show notes at gratitudegeek.com, episode 149, for links to all the Greevy resources mentioned today, and of course to connect with Rob Broadhead and his company, Developpreneur. If you enjoyed this episode, why not leave a 5-star review? Look for the leave a review link in the show notes, gratitudegeek.com, episode 149. Our theme music is track 14 by Rev Brock and Solily. I've been your host, Candice Hardarty. Join me on my mission to spread gratitude, sow seeds of appreciation, and harvest a bounty of generosity and kindness. Stay groovy, my friends.
Stay groovy, my friends.